Welcome to Short Slabs. We're about to unlock the secrets to having a wildly successful card show. Whether you are a seasoned seller or just dipping your toes in the world of trading cards, stick around because I've got you covered. Hey there, card enthusiasts. I'm Tyler, and today we're going to dive deep into the art of hosting a killer card show table. Now, I've been selling cards at shows since I was 8 years old, and through the years, I've had plenty of bad shows and plenty of good shows. Along the way, I've identified some key areas, 6 specifically, that can make or break your card show experience. These include, and we're going to run through them, in order of most importance to least importance, and then cover them individually. Having what buyers want, having cards at prices buyers are willing to pay, being street smart, having an organized table, being engaging with your customers, having a good location at the venue, and being a masterful negotiator. The last piece is going to be that being masterful negotiator. We're going to go into detail with that, but each of these has been ranked from most important to least important. Again, with the low inception being the art of negotiation, the topic that everyone likely wants to hear about first. But for that, you're going to have to wait until the end. Let's go ahead and jump into these 6, starting with the most important factors. The number one factor for having a successful sports card show is you have to have what buyers want. Plain and simple. Supply and demand principles are well at play here as a seller. It is your responsibility to maximize the demand for the cards displayed at your table. This can mean a variety of things, but I like to think of it this way. This means your table needs to include players that are actively hot, a good mix of low end, medium end, and high end, a good mix of slabs and raw cards. Now, your goal is not to have a table that applies to every single genre. You as a seller likely have a niche, whether it's vintage, baseball prospects, Pokemon, whatever. Stick to your genre, as it's impossible to appease the demands of every single buyer. But for your specific niche, you need to have what those buyers want. That brings me to the second most important factor. You have to have what the buyers want, but you have to have it at the price they are willing to pay. Doesn't it suck to keep walking by table after table as a buyer, looking at display cases full of amazing cards with dealers asking 10 times the current going rate? Yeah, it stinks. Now, sellers are under no obligation to sell all of their items at market price. Expecting that as a buyer is putting you as a buyer in the wrong. Their card, their price, don't like it, how you doing, keep it moving. There are plenty of other dealers around. But because we're talking about how to have a successful sports card show as a dealer, not an underwhelming show, it is important to note that you not only have to have what people want, but also at a price they are willing to pay. Now, how much should buyers pay? Well, I have lots of thoughts on that. And many of you are going to find them controversial. I find them logical, but again, wait until the end of the video for that. Third, in order to have a successful show, there are some personal quality traits that the dealer has to possess. One of those is you have to be street smart. Now, we're going to talk later on about dealers having to be engaging with their customers and to be personable, but being street smart is different. This separates the good dealers from the bad. Street smart dealers are efficient and effective. They don't waste time with tire kickers. They're sharp and tactful. They know their prices. They know how to quickly assess a buyer who brings cards over to their table to try and sell, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's junk, whether it's worth their time. They negotiate quickly and effectively, knowing that time is money and wasting precious time negotiating over garbage, trying to be sold at inflated prices is only taking time away from selling inventory. This is one of those things that I like to classify as you either have it or you don't. This isn't meant to really be an insult, but think of used car salesmen. Time is money. They know their floor price. They know what they have into each vehicle. They know their margin. They know what they are honed in on buying that makes the highest yield. They know their business in and out and don't waste time nor entertain offers for things that they aren't interested in buying. They are street smart. The fourth most important factor in having a good show is having a well-organized table. Now, it doesn't matter if you have what the people want at the price they're willing to pay. If your table isn't set up such that buyers can find it, it's going to be a problem. Table real estate is valuable. Show promoters are making hands over fists, bukus of cash by charging outrageous prices for such small amounts of real estate. It is your responsibility as a seller to maximize that real estate to ensure that you are maximizing the amount of connections between buyer eyeballs and cards those eyeballs want, period. You do that by being organized. Ideally, you do that by pricing your cards, all of them. Something I don't always get a chance to do since I operate mainly on eBay and prices fluctuate, and honestly I'd rather sell on eBay in my underwear watching a baseball game. So I don't always get to that. By having a nice display case, well arranged where every card is shown, bringing out cards that serve as marketing tools for your table. You may not necessarily want to sell them, but it's generating buzz and keeping people at your table because you have good stuff. You don't want your showcase to be a museum though, you want it to be things you want to move. Well-organized card boxes, whether it's value boxes, dollar boxes, $5 boxes, 10 and up boxes, team boxes, sport boxes, by year boxes. Getting as granular as you can is only going to help buyers quickly catalog and navigate to what they are looking for, and that's vital to ensuring that they stick around and look through your inventory and eventually buy. Fifth, and I briefly touched on this, you need to be engaging. I mentioned street smart, but you need to know when to cut people off and who are wasting your time, but at the same time, balance that with being a human being and enjoying the hobby. Enjoying the discussions, communicating with buyers over not only the cards, but the players, the sport, the hobby shenanigans of the day, the gossip. If you don't enjoy conversing with other people, then you have no business setting up at a show. This isn't a simple programmed algorithm of zeros and ones. It's called human interaction. An art form now seemingly becoming lost in an increasingly digital age that is creating a bunch of just straight up weird people that's hard to talk to. By actually demonstrating human sociable skills, you can actually set yourself apart. Now, perhaps the least important, but still a factor, is your location in the venue. Now, if you have quality stuff, word's gonna get around and you're gonna get traffic. But it helps if you have a good spot. What is a good spot? Well, by definition, where the foot traffic is and where the eyeballs can see you. Corner aisle spots are great. They're the intersection of the card show highway. Why does McDonald's, Walgreens, CVS all buy corner spots? Because they hired a bunch of geniuses to study traffic patterns and conclude corner spots attract the most eyeballs. So find you a corner spot. It also helps if that corner spot is near something else that generates foot traffic, like the line for grading submissions or an autograph signing guest. The entrance, obviously, or even the concessions. Basically maximize your visibility to ensure maximum traffic. All right, now we've talked about 6 factors to ensuring a good show, and these are great factors. Now I want to talk briefly about negotiating, and as a dealer, how you should price your cards. I want to go in depth into this in a standalone video, but I want to give my gist of my take here. Buyers are becoming increasingly difficult to work with, and I blame most of this on them consuming influencer bullshit. But all of them, for the most part, are only interested in ripping you off as a dealer. Let's just cut to the chase. They want your best stuff at the lowest possible price. Now, as a dealer, you want to get the highest possible price for your cards, so the incentive structure between the buyer and the seller is naturally conflicting. It is always at odds. Now, because of this, there have emerged several rules that influencers are beginning to follow, such as a percentage discount off comps. And of course, there's numerous sub-points to make about the how to identify comps and how to use them appropriately, auction versus buy now, volume of sales, etc. But put simply, buyers want a percentage off of an agreed upon comp. Most often, what you will hear is 15% off comps. But I've even heard some people offer 25% off comps. That's insane. Now, herein lies the problem with today's card show pricing model. It is completely ass backwards compared to nearly every other industry. Many of you are familiar with the concept of convenience stores. Convenience stores operate on margins almost exclusively based on one variable: convenience. When you go to a convenience store, you are going into that store under the premise that whatever purchase you make, you are not getting the cheapest possible price. You are paying a markup for the convenience of being able to obtain that product immediately, right now. So I have to pose the question, why is it the norm that the expectation is that buyers are entitled to not only a discount off of online comps, but they are starting negotiation asking for the entire discount and then some? Now, let's use an example. Let's say there's a card that routinely, consistently sells for exactly $100 on eBay plus shipping plus tax. From a buyer's perspective, the buyer, after finalizing the transaction, likely pays $100 for the card plus $5 for shipping at a minimum, and likely, in addition to that, a tax, which is typically between 5 to 7% depending on the state. Some states 0, but in general 5 to 7%. So let's roughly estimate this to be a $6 tax. The total transaction cost to acquire this item is $111. Now, if the buyer has a reseller's license and are tax exempt, they don't have to pay this tax, so the acquisition cost is only $105. Now, let's view the transaction from the seller's perspective. They sell this item on eBay. Let's assume they make no money on shipping, but they must pay a 13.25% eBay fee. I pay a smaller fee as I operate a store, so I get a discount. And then I also have a 10% discount because I'm a top-rated seller, so my effective eBay fee is roughly 10.8%. But let's use this example to appeal to the masses because most eBay sellers suck and can't achieve quality metrics to achieve top-rated seller status. They should watch my soon-to-be-released videos, likely membership required only, FYI, to do better because it does in fact pay. So, back to the example. So, that $100 sale is assessed at 13.25% fee is now $86.75 take-home price. So let's simply simplify this. If a buyer buys this card on eBay, they pay between $105 to $111 depending on if the tax is applied, and based on my sales history, 95% of the buyers have to pay the tax. A seller takes home $86.75. Therein lies a spread, and that spread is what you could call a negotiation zone. It is a spread of roughly $18.25 to $23.25 that in a fair and effective market would be evenly split between the buyer and the seller. So if a buyer comes to you and says, I'll offer you this card for 15% below comp, so I'll offer you $85, would you consider this fair? The negotiation tactic is always focusing on what the seller has to take home. But why is it that the sellers allow for the premise of the negotiation to start and focus exclusively on the seller's perspective and not at all factor in the buyer's perspective and their acquisition cost for acquiring the card online? If they bought the card elsewhere, they would have to pay $18.25 or $23.25 more. Why are they asking for all of the spread and then some? Additionally, we are not even factoring in, again, convenience. The buyer literally is looking at the card. They can feel the card. If they buy it, they can lick the card. If they feel obligated, they can alter the card with Kurt's Duck Butter Card Care. They can molest it with their greasy little hands immediately and not have to wait on having the card come in the mail, risk that the card arrives damaged or in poor condition. There is a convenience on the buyer's behalf of purchasing the card in person. Are we going to simply ignore the convenience incentive? So you're probably asking, Ty, what is a fair price for this $100 card? Well, I've identified the spread, which is roughly $18.25 to $23.25. If that spread is evenly shared, that spread is basically a sharing of roughly $9 to $12, meaning if the card was sold for $86.75 plus $9, it's basically $95.75, or $86.75 plus 12 equals $98.75, the deal would be fair. So essentially, $96 to $98 to $99, that's pretty fair. And this isn't even including a 10 to 20% premium that convenience stores charge for the convenience of buying the product in person. I'm not even factoring that in. So what would be fair for me? I would say in this example, 2 to 3% below eBay comps. That's very, very fair. Now this is using a $100 example. Shipping costs represent a greater proportion of the total acquisition price the cheaper the card gets, and they represent an increasingly negligible proportion of acquisition costs the more expensive a card gets. So a good rule of thumb could be, the cheaper the card, stick closer to eBay comps, because the buyer's replacement cost is far more expensive, and thus they are incentivized to pay eBay comps to avoid buying online and paying for shipping and the tax. The more expensive the card, the more seller benefits, where really the biggest expense driver is purchase tax. In these cases, a simple 5% below eBay comps is more than fair. Both the buyer and seller come out ahead, It makes it worth both of their times, and the buyer gets the card immediately while the seller gets payment immediately. Again, win-win. All right, those are my tips on how to have a successful card show. I'm sure there's going to be many who agree, many who disagree, but whatever the case, let me know down below. See you next time.